the death of Mr. Brown has sort of brought a summation to a syllabus. The situation in Ferguson is very much relocated by the push and the pull that goes on between cops and criminals. And this has nothing to do with Mr. Brown being a criminal, of course not. But being profiled is being profiled. And in mixing with the men in my black genre music label in Texas, I got a smackdown from the police and was treated just as they were, like a nigger. But they've got a very great deal of hatred towards blacks, plus somewhat of an unrealistic fear of the black man himself. And down in Texas, I've sat in some very elite circles where members of the Politico were present, and I mentioned that I believe that President Obama will probably release everyone from federal prison before the end of his term that's in jail under a marijuana offense, and one of them, whose family owns distributorships for a lot of major beer companies, not just domestically and internationally, but in Texas, mentioned that the reason that they're in jail is because there'd be chaos in the streets, and that they're there for a reason. And so if we let them out, that they will retaliate against the white man. Well, that's the furthest thing from the truth. If the black man's genes are in revenge mode, it doesn't include hatred, because memetics has proven that when something affects our survivability process as replicators, because in order for life to exist there has to be replicators, and in order for us to survive and evolve, those replicators have to in their lifetime pick up messages that can be passed on vertically as memes in their DNA to their children from their life experiences. And those are selective. The ones that assist us in survivability get reinforced through our lives, and the ones that are useless fall away and do not get reinforced, and therefore are not retained and written into our DNA as memes and passed on to our children directly, which has an influence on them. Now, this field of memetics is a bit controversial because none of us want a simple explanation for things that are very difficult, and none of us want to believe that we are genetically programmed to respond the way that we do in adversarial, confrontational, emotional, reactionary, defensive and offensive situations. And this situation to me in Ferguson is extremely offensive because, I heard his friend, Mr. Brown's friend that was with him, who said that the cops said, "Get the fuck out the street." And so he just left off nigger, but you can smell it when it's in it. And so, hatred begets hatred, and when I'm spoken to disrespectfully, I respond very aggressively. I don't give a fuck. And so, that's how we as men are programmed to respond in some ways. And this is not about disrespecting authority. It's about disrespecting disrespect. I don't give a fuck if you've got an AK in your trunk. I don't care if you want to pop your trunk and show the glow. I don't care if you're a hired fucking assassin. I don't give a fuck if you're a vigilante police officer. But I do give a fuck about the fact that, we are a melting pot. The United States of America ended slavery because of the efforts of black men in cooperation with white men. And so now we've got the situation where the military or the government is militarizing the police and creating these small armies throughout North America by giving them all of this equipment and additional training, which has created a situation that's different. I mean, the police is supposed to be there in protection of us, all of us. And since the United States is a melting pot, in that none of us were born here unless you're Native American, then, which of course were exterminated pretty much, and not a single treaty with the Indian nations has ever been upheld. And so our United States government is full of shit about half the stuff that it does anyway, and makes mistakes by military. We've got all this extra military equipment. Well, don't give it to police officers. That's what SWAT people are for. We don't need regular police officers in the community walking around aggressively saying, fuck this, fuck that, get the fuck off, and telling us what to do. You ain't my mama, you ain't my papa. I ain't gonna fucking listen to your bullshit. And then we had some people in history that were actually quite smart about what we need to do with our society. One of them was Phoebe Hearst, William Randolph Hearst's wife. He was an original 49er. And when he died in the late 1800s, his wife looked around at the needs within the employee group, because she owned the largest gold mine in the world, the largest copper mine in the world, and the largest silver mine in the world at the time of his death. And these were all migrant and immigrant workers, and they were immigrants, and they stayed in their little groups. So the Hungarians stayed together, the Jews stayed together, the Irish stayed together, the Italians stayed together, the Chinese stayed together, and she thought that this was a problem, because children didn't start school until later years, and she started kindergarten with her own money, and it made a difference. I grew up in an Irish ghetto in Boston, and busing was to balance out the educational differences between blacks and whites in black schools, which had children that were mostly from depressed economies because of the history and the treatment of blacks in the United States, and the fact that they're not operating on an equal playing field. Now, this reminds me of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. And William Carver was an infantry black soldier in this all-black infantry unit. And his commander died. They were off the coast of Carolinas. And they were going after a Confederate fort just right off the coast that was heavily fortified. They lost half of their 600 men, and he picked up the flag when the flag bearer fell, and he told the men after the fight, when 300 were lost, wounded, or captured, that the flag never touched the ground. Now, this was the flag of the United States at the time when he wasn't a citizen in 1863. So he wasn't a citizen, and they fought more valiantly, and he got the Congressional Medal of Honor as the first black man. And then blacks were brought into the military, which now they represent, almost half, or if not more than half, of the component of our United States infantry fighting for our peace and freedoms overseas. Those men are coming back, and they're being persecuted, and they're being treated horribly in our society, even as veterans. And I see it in Texas. I met a young man who moved his family down from the north. He's a New York black man. And he moved to Texas with his wife and his young kids, working at the post office. She's still in the military. He didn't have very much money to feed his children, and so he made a mistake, and he used the gas card from the post office. Well, sure, it's a crime, but the crime needs to fit the punishment. He got 4 felonies. They split it up between 2 communities. It's a $1,500 in Texas will get you a felon. Will make you a felon and get you a felony that will remove your ability to vote, to be able to get any assistance for your family and food stamps or anything else. It essentially strips you of your citizenship. So the citizenship that these black Americans and African Americans and then immigrant blacks from multiple ethnicities all over our planet are represented in our community today, and they're not going anywhere. Regardless of what Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood tried to do in aborting 60 million babies since it's been incepted, was to control the black population because of the poverty and the fact that she thought she was doing good. Well, exterminating unborn black children, back then was the reason for Planned Parenthood, and nowadays, today, it's considered what? Social justice. Well, abortion is a right for a woman, and I don't believe that I want to get involved in that. So that's their business, but I don't believe that it was started the right way with the right intentions. This brings me to the fact that, I think that our United States is in a state of disgrace. I have been a member of the global community since I was in the Air Force in the 80s, and I was discharged for being a homosexual in 1986. I never thought that in my lifetime I would ever see homosexuals or gay men and women serving in the military. When I was down in Texas, I saw some that were even coupled up, and so I was proud to have been part of that process, even though I was arrested, beaten, and brutalized and my life was in danger. But this isn't about me. This is about the fact that we are a melting pot. I don't know if anyone remembers what that means from our high school and grade school teachings, but being the fact that we represent every nation in the world as our nation united, I think that we do hold the veritable keys to the future as a leader in the world, because we represent everyone in the world as our United States. And I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted to the core of my soul, because the police don't need to be militarized the way that they have. They need to step back and step off. This aggression, begets aggression, we know. And, the fact that, we're a country that's a de facto melting pot, going to pot, over pot, and down in Texas, there was recently a kid that was, in Georgetown, Texas, that got arrested for making pot brownies and was going to get life in prison. And so, this is foolish. The United States of America is not united until our laws are federalized and until our civil liberties are understood everywhere. I'm personally not a believer in gay marriage as a gay man. That's because I've been divorced 3 times in the last 25 years, and gay relationships tend not to last as long as straight relationships. And for myself, it would have just been an extra bit of chaos in trying to move forward in my life and on with my life. And so, but I do believe that everybody should have the right to choose. And so, a black man doesn't get to choose how he's going to be treated if he's treated disrespectfully. And this isn't about disrespect, this is about endangerment. And so, what it means to me is that, these genes that are passed on to us vertically through our parents are also infected as horizontal memes to our community. And so, we become more comfortable with our own kind. That's why when a foreign body invades or infects our swarm, it makes us feel uncomfortable. Well, we don't have to all pull up our guns and start shooting people over it, because that's not how we are supposed to react in a civil society. The Internet of Things is creating global connectivity that's not going to stop a movement of global peace, but that will happen with a global religion. I think that will probably happen within 50 years. It won't be in my lifetime. I don't give a fuck whose God you want to pray yourself to, or flog yourself over, or go in and cry into a crying cross. Bunch of bullshit. There is no justice in the fact that we have spirituality built into us. It's a sixth sense of chakra. It's part of our global energies and connectivity to each other as a community. If we don't provide diversity training, which is the most uncomfortable, unpleasant thing. I've had to go through diversity training myself over transsexual that worked in one of my companies. Drove me fucking nuts. It took me a long time to get over my uncomfortableness with, men acting like girls are wearing dresses. And that's for them, not for me. I don't care really anymore, but I've actually gotten to become friends with some of them, and I realize that a lot of it has to do with sexual molestation and early sexualization as young children. And then, ways for them to support, habits of existence because they live in a state of constant depression. And so, I think that the police have to step down and step back, because young men are not in control of their mind, body, and soul. And down in Ferguson, I know that there were riots going on, but you do not pull automatic weapons on families that are trying to evacuate. The police need to take more of a relaxed dispensation when they're in a scenario of conflict and chaos. You're not supposed to meet a situation in defensive posture with an aggressive tactics. And so telling them to get the fuck out the street, creates hostility. There isn't any way why I would have said, gentlemen, why are you walking down the street? Why don't you move off to the side, please? You could be endangering yourself. No, he didn't give a fuck about that, because he's a power monger. Men are supposed to be kept under control within their command structure by their commanders. This is a fault of the police commander. This is not the fault of that dirty cop. And he's filthy. He's filthy in the mouth, he's filthy in what he did, and he will pay for that. And I'm disgusted by the whole thing. And we have to understand that black people have a higher dopamitic effect because of the melatonin in their skin. I had a friend that was doing research at a university and wrote a paper on it, and it was squelched. Nobody wants to think that there's a reason why a young black man might be a little bit less controlled in a situation that's adversarial like that than maybe a young white boy. Well, first of all, it's because his social memes and his communal memes tell him that when a gun's pulled on him by a cop, that cop doesn't really give a fuck if he lives or dies. And fear of your life causes you to do things. I have been in fear of my life before, and it causes you to do some things that you thought you would never do. And I think that a lot of people understand that. But there ain't no fucking cop pulling a gun on me. I had 3 cops pull guns on me down in Texas, and I told them to stand the fuck down and approach them like an animal, because I will not be treated like one by anyone. Except when I was treated like a nigga, because I was mixing with my niggas. Well, you know what? I ain't no nigga, and my niggas weren't niggas either. Not the way that they talk about it. They're just my brothers. And, not everyone is my friend. And not everyone can be my friend, and not everybody can be my brother, and not everybody can be my nigga. But in my community, I don't go around disrespecting people because of their color. Or because of their sexual orientation. Or because of their handicap. We need to start respecting each other and realize that if we feel a little bit uncomfortable, if you're a white woman in a room with 7 black men, they don't want to rape you. Get over that stupid ass primal fear of what? The fact is you don't understand the black man's sexual means. What it means to you is that you're just a dumbass and think that for some reason he might actually want you in some sort of a hostile way. A rapist is somebody who is an evil, vile person, and it's an act of violence. It's not a sexual act. So if a black man looks at you and gives you that takedown look, it just means he thinks you're sexy. Why don't you fucking take a compliment and move on with your life and shake your booty and flip your hand, say a nice little hello. Doesn't mean bullshit about bullshit. And so, the confusion in our state of a nation of disgrace really has to come down to the fact that we need to federalize standards of training for all police force. We need to move them around from police force to police force just like we did in busing. Send them white cops to an all-nigger fucking precinct. How about that? Where he works with 80 fucking black cops for 2 months, gets a bit of diversity training in a place that ain't 98% white, where he has 80% of the reasons to pull over everyone that's black because of an assumption in his brain. Well, if you keep pulling over, if you keep accusing somebody of being guilty of something, they're eventually going to be guilty of it because we all commit crimes. There is no way in our United States of America that you cannot commit a crime. I know friends that are faking on their taxes. I know judges that are snorting cocaine. I know baggage claim handlers that are stoned all day long when they hook up their tractor and push you full of fuel at the airport out into the fucking runways with the other airplanes, right? I know everything. I know surgeons that show up for work after drinking and doing cocaine and fucking bullshit until 3, 4 o'clock in the fucking morning. And so, you know what? I don't know what this is. This is the fact that everyone else looks at everyone else's situation in the dispensation of, it ain't happening to me, so it isn't my problem. And guess what? It is going to happen to you if we continue to live in a more militarized environment and in a police state. There needs to be a stand down between the public and the police, and it has to happen in some very severe ways. I think that it's necessary, just like in England, to take the guns away from the police. Take the guns away from a certain segment of the police and have them out there in the community outreach as an outreach, walking around, unarmed, in uniform, saying hello to the people like in the older days. What's up with you today? Well, officer, not too much. Well, we're just out here today in our community outreach. You ever heard of that? Instead of pulling over saying get out the street, get the fuck off the street. I do not like the way that I've been treated by cops in Texas. But most of it's hands off. None of the cops in Texas are real bad, that I met myself. But they are all involved in if they go along with the collective because they want to get that paycheck and they want to go home safe. They're not protected in serving. They know who's dealing drugs, who's doing what, who's selling guns, who's doing this, who's doing that. They don't want to go in there. They know that they're going to put their lives in danger. They don't go there. We don't go there. But it's there. They push in a little bit, round up a couple on the periphery that are acting a little fucking tweaked out and bullshit, planked out, sure. Ask that bitch to give them a bunch of names, then they go round them up and do it the easy way. But they're not interested in solving crimes. They're not interested in going in and doing the dirty work to take care of our safety because it's an arrangement. The police have an arrangement with the criminals, and then they don't like the arrangement. They don't feel comfortable with it because, the machismo and all the other bullshit that goes along with strapping on some bullshit and changing in the locker room with your buddies every day. I think that's a little bit overdone. Cops are not part of the U.S. military. I was part of the U.S. military, and that was a professional organization. A lot of these police organizations that I see down south are filled with a bunch of old cronies, just like the wardens in the prisons in Texas. Are the most fat cat despots I've ever heard of in my entire life. Guards are sexually abusing inmates. If you cannot protect the sexual rights and the human rights of somebody that you're putting in jail over a small marijuana offense, then you cannot put them in jail under the Constitution of our United States. So I'm going to leave this at 20 fucking minutes because I'm already getting pissed off and go on with my day. But this thing in Ferguson's got me hot. And I'm going to be speaking about it every day. Peace.